Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of the problems from your review sheet and I'm going to go over a problem just like all of the rest of the problems on your review sheet. And so you can use this as a guide to how you work each problem. We'll start with number one. What is an algebraic expression for the word phrase, the difference of 5 and y? Well, what you have to do is you have to know what the word difference means and whether or not you're supposed to do it in the same order or a different order. The word difference means to subtract, so we know we're going to have a minus sign. And the only time you go in the opposite order from what you see is if you see less than or more than. And so we don't see less than or more than, so we just write 5 minus y. And that's what the difference of 5 and y is as an algebraic expression. Number two, it's wanting the simplified form of the expression. And I see this problem and it looks like an order of operation problem. And so what we do is we remember, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. And I've underlined my dear and Aunt Sally because whichever one comes first in the problem is which one you do first. So if division comes first, you're going to do division. If multiplication comes first, you're going to do multiplication. So we start with parentheses, and we do have parentheses. I'm going to do those first and bring everything else down. 18 divided by 2 times 3 minus 3 plus 8. And this means multiply by whatever we get. So times 9 minus 4 is 5. Then, so I've done parentheses, exponents. There are no exponents, so I can move on to multiplication and division. Which one comes first? In this problem, division comes first. So we're going to do that. 18 divided by 2 is 9 times 3 minus 3 plus 8 times 5. Well, then I have multiplication. 9 times 3 is 27 minus 3 plus 8 times 5. Then I still have multiplication, and I can't do adding and subtracting until very last. So I have to do my multiplication, and everything else comes down. 8 times 5 is 40. Now I'm down to subtraction and addition. And the common mistake is some people will say 3 plus 40 is 43, and then we'll want to subtract by 27. And what you actually do is addition and subtraction, whichever one comes first. So we do subtraction first. 27 minus 3 is 24, plus 40 is 64. And that is the answer to this number 2. For number 3, it says to evaluate. And so we know that u is 4, x is 7, and y is 3. And so what we do is we go in and we substitute. Instead of u, we write 4 plus x is 7, and y is 3. Then we follow our order of operations. We have to multiply before we add. 4 plus 21, which is 25. And that's the answer to this number 3. Moving right along, we say what is the order of all of those from least to greatest. And you need to kind of get them in the same form, like this is a decimal, this is a radical, this is a fraction. So in my opinion, I think getting them all to decimals will be your best bet. And so what we're going to do is I'm just going to change these to decimals first, and then I'm going to order them. So 4.1 is already a decimal. I'll just bring that down, comma. When you type in the square root of 19, you get 4.36. When you type in 21 over 5, you get 4.2. Negative 4.4 is already a decimal. And 8 over 2 is just 4, or 4.0. So now that I see these, I want to order them from least to greatest, and I have a negative, so I know that one's going to go first, negative 4.4, and I can mark it out. Then I have 4.1 next. Nope, before 1.1, I actually have 4, but instead of writing 4, I'm going to write it in the way that it came. It came as 8 over 2. So even though 4 would go next, we're going to write it in the same format, 8 over 2. Mark that out. Then 4.1 would go next. Then 4.2 would go next. And lastly, we have 4.36, which is the same as the square root of 19. So the square root of 19 would go last. And that's the order from least to greatest. Number 5, it says at the grocery you buy a carton of milk for $2.55, a loaf of bread for $3.15, and a bag of cookies for $2.05. It says to use mental math, but you guys will have a calculator, so you can use your calculator to add them all up, and you end up getting $7.75. Number 6, what is the solution to the equation? Well, this is where I like to draw my line to separate the two sides. And this is the thing I'm wanting to get by itself, the x. And so I've got to move everything away from the x, which means this 5.2 is moved away by adding it because I want a 0. After I add 5.2, I bring down 4.3x equals negative 3.9. Then I have to get rid of the 4.3, and to undo multiplication, I divide both sides by 4.3. And I end up with a pretty long decimal, but we'll just go out. I'm going to use approximately negative 0.91. And that's because I rounded, I needed to use the approximately signs. Number 7 says, what is the solution to the equation? And so what we have to do is we have to undo this division, and we have to undo the addition. And we've got to get rid of this bottom number, the denominator, before we do anything else. So to undo division, we multiply both sides by 4. And that will actually, 4 divided by 4 will divide out or will cancel. And you're left with y plus 3 equals whatever 7 times 4 is, which is 28. Well, then you need to move the 3 over. And the way that you do that is by subtracting it. And we end up with y equals 25. And remember, you can always go back and check by plugging it in and making sure that it works. For number 8, another one that you have to solve for, and I'm erasing this so we can have some space. I'll draw my line through the equal sign, and I have to get all the variables on the same side, and we can't just say negative 5 minus 2 is negative 7h. We actually need to move one thing over to the other, and it doesn't matter which one you move. So I'm going to move this 5 over here, and the way that I move it is by adding it. You could move the 2h to the other side by adding it if you wanted to. And we're left with 9 equals 3, negative 2 plus 5 is plus 3h. Well, now I've got to get everything away from the h, so this 3 needs to move over, and I'll move it over by subtracting it. And I end up getting 9 minus 3 is 6 equals 3h. Divide by 3, and we are left with h equals 2. Again, you could substitute this 2 back in everywhere you see h and see if you get a true statement. And if you do get a true statement, you know that you did it correctly. Number 9 says at an automobile factory, 1,834 parts are made in 4 hours. What is the average at which they are made per hour? So we know we have 1,834 parts in 4 hours. And so we take 1,834 and divide it by 4, and we end up with about 458.5 parts per hour. Now, we can't really have 0.5 of a part, so you could actually say about 459 parts. Number 10 says, what is the solution of the proportion? And so I see this and I automatically think, well, I could technically get rid of the division by multiplying, or you guys have learned it as cross multiplying. So what I will do is I'll multiply 7 times the entire top of its diagonal, g minus 2, and I have to have parentheses around it because I have to multiply 7 times all of it, equals 9 times 3, which is 27. Well, then I go through and I solve this by distributing first. 7g minus 14 equals 27. Move the 14 over by adding it. That gives me 7g equals 41. Divide each side by 7. And when you type it in your calculator, it gives you a decimal. I really don't want you to cut the decimal off unless you have to. And so that answer as a fraction is just 41 over 7. Number 11 says, write an inequality that represents the verbal expression. All real numbers less than or equal to 100. Well, less than is the one that makes the L shape, or the one, if you hold your hands up, it's on the left side, or equal to means that line underneath it. So to write all real numbers, we don't know what that is, so we just define a variable. X is less than or equal to 100. Of course, if it were greater than or equal to, you would have the other inequality symbol. Number 12 says, what is the graph of the inequality? Anytime you see an inequality symbol or an alligator mouth, you have to think shading. So we know 4 is going to go in the middle. To the right of 4 is 5, and to the left of 4 is 3. And because there's no or equal to here, we have an open circle around 4, and we read this as b is greater than 4. And so we want to shade the numbers that are greater than 4. And we either are going to shade to the right or to the left. Well, the numbers that are greater than 4 are all on the right. So we shade everything to the right of 4 with an open circle around it.